Welcome to Linguistically Aware, the podcast about all things linguistics. You are listening to CJSW 90.9 FM, broadcasting out of Calgary, Alberta at the University of Calgary campus radio station, located on Treaty 7 land. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The City of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. My name is Brooklyn Shepard, and I'm a PhD student in linguistics at the University of Calgary. In this conversation-based podcast, I sit down with linguists, or language experts, to talk about the ways language and linguistics interacts with our daily lives. In this episode, I sit down with Dr. Elizabeth Ritter, a linguistics professor here at U of C. Dr. Ritter is particularly interested in the subfield of linguistics called syntax, or how sentences are built up and understood in our minds. In this chat, we talk about a very fundamental property of language, its hierarchical structure. Dr. Ritter walks us through how ambiguity in sentences and words can tell us about hidden patterns in language. One thing that is truly fascinating is that many of these patterns are believed to be consistent across all languages of the world. Well, hi, Betsy. I just want to start by saying thank you very much for joining me here today.
That's my pleasure.
So I was wondering if you could start out by introducing yourself, a little bit about your background in linguistics and what you do at the University of Calgary.
Okay. I actually started my university education in chemistry and physics. And after a year of that, thought, no, I don't want to be a doctor. So I moved on to business school, thinking that would make me rich. And after 3 more years, I thought, yeah, rich isn't fun. I mean, it wasn't then. And then, so I left, and I actually started this whole journey because I went to a kibbutz. I'd heard you could work on a farm, and they would give you food and lodging, and it would give me time to figure out my next move. So I got there, and they said, do you want to work a full day or a half day and do a half day of language classes? And I thought, yeah, language classes, half day, yeah. So I took Hebrew for a half day every day and worked in the chicken coop for a half day. But while I was in class, I was just fascinated because there were people from all over the world, Spanish speakers and French speakers and English speakers and Russian speakers. And each group struggled with different aspects of the learning process. And for whatever reason, I kind of picked things up quickly. So I had lots of time to watch my fellow students, and I got really intrigued by that and thought, yeah, I think I want to be a linguist. And so I went back to school, and turns out if you have an undergraduate degree, even if your major was accounting and finance, you can go straight into a master's in linguistics. So that's what I did. And I started at the master's level, and then I did a PhD and wandered around for a little while doing postdocs and such, and then I came to Calgary.
Nice. That's
as a professor.
Yeah. And how long have you been here in Calgary?
Since 1993.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is actually my last year.
Oh, I know. We're going to miss you very much.
Yeah.
It's
my last year of teaching. I'm not going to stop doing linguistics. I'm not done having fun with it.
I know a lot of profs that do that. They're like, I'm retiring, which means I can focus more on research.
Exactly. That's why you retire, so you can do your research.
That's really cool. I remember you mentioning that you had a business degree, in Ling 301, the intro syntax class that I took with you, and I remember like being so curious as to like how that happened and why that happened. I didn't know though that you started out in chemistry and physics.
Yeah, my original plan was I wanted to be a doctor, like many people.
Yeah,
and so you had to do chemistry and physics or biology or some sciences.
Yeah,
and after a year, I really didn't think it wasn't for me. It just wasn't that interesting to me, and so I thought, well, let's try something else.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Yeah, because I also started out in physics, and I did find it interesting, but it just it didn't like pull on my heart like linguistics did. I was like, this is cool, and it's cool like because now I study phonetics and I do get to use the physics stuff a decent amount. So yeah, it's like there is enough overlap, I would say, still.
And I think when you study different things and you take a bit of a circuitous path, you always pick things up that are valuable, and I think you have a deeper appreciation when you finally land on something that, as you say, pulls at your heartstrings. And when I got into linguistics, it was like, yeah, this is it. This is so cool.
Yeah, me too. I know. Yeah, those my first like intro classes. I was like, my mind was blown. Like I got chills in those classes. And maybe I'm just a nerd, but
no, I had the same chills. Yeah.
So I know, like in your area of linguistics, you study primarily syntax.
That's correct.
And so, first of all, I'm wondering if you could just give like a brief sort of explanation of what syntax is, maybe. And what got you interested into that? So I know like syntax, at least in your 301 class, I know we like sometimes you talk about the structure of words as well as the structure of sentences. And so I'm sort of wondering what kind of pulled you in to that world of looking at the different structures in language.
Okay, well, that's a great question. Sometimes in retrospect, I think it was a process of elimination. But so in linguistics, there are essentially three core areas that all linguistics programs engage in. One is phonetics phonology, which is the sound system. The second is semantics pragmatics, which is meaning in language. And the third is syntax and morphology or morphosyntax, which is the structure of sentences, that's syntax, or the structure of words, which is morphology. And when people think about grammar, what they're thinking about typically is syntax. So when I'm talking to people who don't know what linguistics is, I say I specialize in grammar, and they seem to nod knowingly most of the time. And then they immediately say, I don't have good grammar. And my response is always, your grammar is perfect. So that was part of your so I explained to you what syntax is and what drew me in.
Yeah.
Well, I really liked phonology. So the sound system is really, it felt very mathematical, very algebraic, which appealed to me. The problem is I have a terrible ear. So when we got to tones, which is languages like Chinese and Vietnamese are tone languages. So the way you pronounce vowels, whether they're high pitch or low pitch, I think I'm getting this right, affects what the word means. So depending on how you pronounce my could mean horse or mother or hemp or I think one or two other things. And I could tell that things were different, but I couldn't tell what was high and what was low. And I thought that really wasn't ideal for a life in phonology. And my early experiences with semantics were extremely frustrating because I had just the worst semantics prof, and I thought not going down that road. And that left syntax, which was perfect because it's it's also quite mathematical, but it's really the structures of sentences and phrases is just so intriguing and exciting, and it just makes me happy.
Yeah, I can see it on your face right now. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I mean, as you know, I'm also a huge syntax fan.
Yes.
Yeah, there is something really, really, really fun about it. And so I'm wondering what kinds of, so you're interested in syntax and grammar generally. So what kinds of questions, research questions, do you ask in your research? What parts of grammar do you specifically look at?
So I tend to be interested in questions of categorization. So what makes a word a noun as opposed to a verb? And I've also been really intrigued by the little grammatical words that basically serve as the glue for sentence structure. So words like the or a or will and have and be, those are really the most interesting grammatical formatives, because they really are there just to serve a structural purpose, I think. Their meaning is so hard to pin down. Try asking somebody what the means, and not easy. Or is, what does that mean? Just is. So, but they're critical to the structure of English, for example. And then you look at a language like Russian that doesn't have a definite article, and then the question becomes, how is Russian different from English if you don't have definite articles? What does that do to sentence structure? Or, in fact, Russian also doesn't have be, at least not in the present tense. So you would say something in Russian, you would say, she was tall, but instead of she is tall, you just say she tall.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting my Russian right.
Yeah.
The fun thing about being a syntactician is you know so much about the structure of languages that you don't speak. And so people often ask how many languages I speak, and I say effectively one, but I know a lot about a lot of languages. It's fun to be able to play with languages that you don't speak and be able to figure things out about them. And so a lot of my research has been on these elements that they're called functional categories. They're the categories that basically hold the structure together, and trying to figure out what they do and looking at how they vary from one language to another. And that's been a large part of my career. I've also spent a lot of time looking at pronoun systems. In the 21st century, pronouns have become really interesting, but people are interested in pronouns that are used by non-binary individuals or when people don't want to specify a gender. But the whole system is just absolutely fascinating, and the range of variation is just surprising. So every language has a pronoun for me, a pronoun for you, and a pronoun for everybody and everything else. But in some languages, they have the equivalent of a he and a she, but not an it. So you don't actually have a pronoun for things. Mm-hmm. So you just use this or that. But the range of variation is surprisingly narrow. So you have these, they're called persons. I is first person, you is second person, he, she, and it are third person. And you have singular and plural in almost every language. And beyond that, it doesn't get too exotic. Sometimes you have pronouns that mean exactly two individuals, and sometimes you have pronouns that mean a handful of individuals. And that's about as much as the number goes. And as for gender, well, that's a whole other kettle of fish. Things get a little crazy when it comes to gender. But almost no language has a different form of I for females and males. Spanish has a different form of we, but they kind of cheat because they have the form we, and then they add this chunk to it, which means literally others, and that can be masculine or feminine, but the we part doesn't change. I find that really interesting, that we don't, in when we refer to ourselves, we don't need gender. And then when talking to to you, only Semitic languages, so Hebrew and Arabic and languages related to those, actually have a separate form for you being female and you being male. And then lots and lots of languages have a he and a she, like English, but lots and lots of languages also have only one pronoun, which could be he or could be she. So just seeing what that does to the whole grammar and trying to figure out what the implications of these differences are is really interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. I'm wondering, like, if like, so all languages have pronouns, and all
languages have pronouns,
and they have these, like, and they're all quite similar. It sounds like
they're really similar. The range of variation is shockingly narrow when you look at how other parts of the grammar can be so different.
Yeah, and so, like, do we as, like, linguists or in, like, cognitive science or anything like that know why pronouns are so fundamental?
No,
sorry, that's a big question.
That's a huge question. Well, some people think that pronouns are essentially just bundles of features, and we use feature in a technical sense. They're just sort of the bits of, let's say, nouns that engage with the rest of the sentence. So if I say something like, the boy runs, the boy is singular, so you have the form runs. But if I say the boys run, boys is plural, and so then you have a different form of the verb. So singular, plural is those are number features. So number and person and gender are the features of, let's say, subjects of nouns that can be marked on the verb. So pronouns are purely bundles of features that are used for cross-referencing or other parts of the sentence.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. You're listening to Linguistically Aware, broadcasting on CJSW 90.9 FM on Treaty 7 Line. Listen to this episode or any other episode of Linguistically Aware in full at cjsw.com or Apple Podcasts. Just search Linguistically Aware. If you'd like to learn more about linguistics at the University of Calgary, be sure to visit our website, calgarylinguistics.ca. So, like, we've talked a decent amount about, like that syntax is often the study of the structure that is in language. And one thing I know about, like, syntax and morphology or morphosyntax, however you want to call it, is that there's this idea that this structure is hierarchical, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not just a string of words or sounds. There's actually some hierarchical structure in there. And so I'm wondering, this is probably another big question, but can you explain, first of all, what that means? Like, what are we talking about when we're saying that this is hierarchical? And why do people think that? Like, is there evidence that you have, or, yeah?
Yeah, there's a lot. So when we say that syntactic structure is hierarchical, what that effectively means is that when you put words together to form a sentence, it's not like putting beads on a string, so any given word has effectively the same relationship to what came before it and what came after it, but rather words form phrases, and phrases can be part of larger phrases. And so, for example, if I have a sentence like, the bug ate the cheese. Don't ask me if that's okay. So bug forms a unit with the first. And then the bug forms a unit with ate the cheese. And similarly, first you form the cheese, then you form ate the cheese, and then the whole thing comes together. So when we say that syntax is hierarchical, all that means is that we have smaller chunks that build into larger chunks. And evidence for that comes from, in part, something called structural ambiguity. So ambiguity simply means that something has more than one meaning. And you can have more than one meaning because of the meaning of particular words. So the word bank in English can either refer to the side of a river or it can refer to a financial institution. That has nothing to do with structural ambiguity. But other kinds of ambiguity are more interesting. So so one of the things, so if I talk about, for example, the old men and women, that's actually structurally ambiguous because it can mean the old men and the women of all ages, or it can mean the old people, both male and female. And depending on whether you combine men and women first and then add old, so if you've created a chunk men and women, then old can only modify or describe all the people. But if you first chunk old men, then old only describes the males, and then you can take old men and combine it with women, and you get old men and women. And depending on how that works, you can say the women and old men. Well, that's very clear, because now old can only modify men. But if you say the old women and men, the old men, and there you can when old modifies both men and women, you can have men and women in either order. So old men and women and old women and men on that interpretation mean the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was clear. It's better with a whiteboard.
I know. It's it makes me think of another example that, like, it's like a classic example that I used to see in syntax classes of, like, the boy saw the man with a telescope or something like that. Yeah,
that's probably an easier one. Thank you. So there was an old Marx Brothers thing. I saw an elephant in my pajamas. What he was doing in my pajamas, I'll never know. Right. So these phrases like in my pajamas, depending on where it's added to the structure, it can either modify the elephant or something further away. That's my example in. I saw the boy with a telescope. If with a telescope gets chunked with the boy, then the boy has the telescope. But if with a telescope gets chunked with saw the boy, then the seeing of the boy happened with the telescope, and so I was with the telescope. So you're right. So that's a great example of structural ambiguity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, well, I'm pretty sure I probably learned those in one of your classes. So, so thank you. So it's not like these structures or these ambiguities or whatever, like these different interpretations of the same sentence essentially are because they can have different underlying structures, these different hierarchical structures, right?
Right.
And I'm wondering, like we've talked a decent amount about sentences. I'm wondering if there's examples in words as well. So like, because I know like when we think of like structure in language, like a lot of it is like through like the relationships between words. But what about within a single word? Are there examples similar to that in there?
There are examples. So the one I typically use in my classes is unlockable, which can either mean something that you are able to unlock. So you take lock and you combine it with you get unlock. And then when you add able, then it's something that you can unlock. But it can also mean not lockable because you can form lockable and then add which takes it from being something that you can lock to something that you cannot lock. So unlockable means either not lockable or able to unlock, and that is structural ambiguity in a word. It's much rarer in a word. But one of the really intriguing things that this shows us is that when we build words out of, we call them morphemes, but basically a core or a root, and then you have prefixes, which you add to the beginning, and suffixes, which you add to the end, which are endings. You can't add both a prefix and a suffix at the same time. So you start with lock, and you have to choose one. And then that forms a unit that you add the other one to. And the fact that you can add things one at a time is really a profoundly intriguing property of language that we only discovered relatively recently, that the structure is not only hierarchical, so like a family tree, but that at any point there are only two branches. That's, I find, really a surprising discovery.
And that's also at the sentence level too. Like when you're combining words, you can only do sort of one move at a time when you're building up this tree, as you said. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I remember when I took your 301 and you used that unlockable example. It was that was also another moment where I was like chills all over because I was like, that's so cool. It's very, very cool. I think another example too that I had was unbuttonable too. Yeah. Which might also have been from you. Most of my syntax knowledge is from you.
Good to know.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, like, as we talk about this, like, structure and how these things that, like, languages have in common, like, that we can only add, like, one thing at a time, and it seems to be hierarchical, and that's true across, like, all languages as far as we know, correct?
Yeah.
And so this is like a one common question in linguistics is this something, since this is something we see across all languages, is this something that we are, like, born with when we're born? Are we born to, like, have these restrictions in our structure, or is it something that we get from the environment around us? And what I know that's also a big question, but, like, I'm just wondering, like, what your thoughts are on it, and what kind of the field says as well.
So I work within generative grammar, which is originated with Noam Chomsky. And Chomsky developed this theory that we call universal grammar, which is the idea that we are all born with an innate capacity for language. And what that innate capacity consists of are basically constraints on what's possible. So the idea that you can only merge or combine two things at once is part of these constraints. And so I do think that it's an interaction between nature and nurture, that we have this, we come to the task with something already in our brains that enables us to learn any language that we are exposed to in a remarkably short period of time. But it's also the case that we need the language data, we need the exposure in order to develop a grammar of a specific language. There are unfortunate cases of children who were isolated and never developed language because they weren't exposed to language. And when they were found in late adolescence or even later, they never were able to fully learn language. So that seems to suggest that there's something that we come to the task with, but that it isn't, but that there's a critical period where we can use it or we lose it. I think that the hierarchical structure has to be hardwired in our brains, because I can't imagine how you would learn that otherwise. So languages differ in where we put the verb in the sentence, for example. So English has the verb in the middle in something like the child ate cake. In a language like Welsh, you would say ate the child the cake. And in a language like Japanese, you might say the child cake ate. So linear order is something you can hear. Hierarchical order, you can't hear. So that seems to me to be, it seems reasonable to assume that the hierarchical aspect of language is part of this universal grammar, which is basically your innate linguistic ability.
Yeah.
That it's just, being human, you're born with looking for hierarchy. So it helps, I think it's also part of even chunking the sentence into pieces is, I don't think that that's as obvious as it might appear to somebody. Once you know language, you go yeah, the child, not child ate.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and so in your example of the different verb, the child ate or ate the child and all of those, so they have different orders, but do they have similar structure or the same?
They do. So that's the interesting thing. So languages like English were very straightforward. You had the child ate cake, so the child is a subject, and ate cake is a predicate. These may be terms that people are familiar with, but they kind of forget what they mean. So the subject in a sentence like that is the one doing the action. So having the subject outside of the predicate forms a chunk, the subject forms a chunk, and then they form a sentence. So that's really easy to do hierarchically. And if you flip the order, so you have if you flip the order of the verb and the object, so the child cake ate or the child ate the cake, those two basically have the same fundamental split between subject and predicate. The one that was really tricky is ate the child cake, because now it looks like the subject is inside the predicate, which should not be possible. And I think for a long time that languages that had verb first structure were a puzzle. And it wasn't until we started looking closely at these functional categories and recognizing that they played such a significant role in the structure of sentences that we were able to solve that puzzle. Because when you look at the structure of languages cross-linguistically, there's surprisingly a lot of uniformity. So about 45% of languages have a structure like English, the child ate the cake. Another 45% have the structure of Japanese, the child, the cake ate. Did I say that right? So 45 are subject, verb, object, and 45% are subject, object, verb. And then of the rest, 5% have this verb initial structure, so ate the child cake. And then 1 or 2% have other orders. So the question is, why do languages tend to have these two orders primarily, and why is this third order, how do you get it at all, and why is it so much less common? And it turns out that it seems to be much more complicated. You need to do some movement to get that to work out, but the other orders, you don't need to move pieces around. So you put things into the structure, and then the fun happens when you start moving things. And we do move things. Like in a question, you move helping verbs. So I will leave versus will I leave. So the will moves around. And so once we started playing around with movement, then we started having even more fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. And I think you gave some really nice examples of like things that make it hard to say that language is just from exposure. There are these things that we have in common. And I know this has always been like a debate in the field, so it's like definitely not an answered one. But yeah, no, I think that was really interesting. We are just about out of time. I'm just wondering if you have anything else you wanted to share about your research in your field before we say goodbye.
So linguistics is just the best field. I just want to say it's just so language.
And you're not biased at all.
No. So language is just one of the most remarkable things that human beings do, and it is infinitely fascinating and intriguing and beautiful, and everyone's language is just that, and it's perfect.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for coming in today. It's been really nice chatting with you.
It's been really fun, and it was always a pleasure having you in class, and this was just like that.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Linguistically Aware. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the fascinating world of linguistics. If you'd like to learn more about linguistics, please visit our website, calgarylinguistics.ca. Until next time, keep exploring the beauty of language.